So that part of the brain, that's one of the things it does. Another thing that it does is it gives you sort of a scale of how good or how bad something is. So the reward center says good or bad, but this part of the brain says 10 out of 10, 0 out of 10. Okay? Chocolate, broccoli. You know what I mean? It's the thing that it gives you sort of a meter, if you will, okay, on how much you like something. Okay? That's two things it does. Now, another thing that it does is it also is responsible for kind of compulsiveness and stuff. Okay? We've talked about OCD in here before. That's exactly the same part of the brain that is not working right, and when people have OCD. And these are folks, you know, OCD is where obsessions, and then the compulsions is what I'm talking about. But a compulsion is where you have a certain behavior that you do over and over and over again, and you can't, it's kind of hard to stop it. It becomes almost like a habit, okay? So that's the third thing that this part of the brain does. So imagine for a second, you know, think about this stuff with addiction, by the way, okay? Compulsive use, right? And you get this rating of, you know, is it good, is it very good, is it, you know, that kind of thing. And then the ability to sort of stop and think, or the willpower, if you will. I guess I can put it that way, the easy way. So it does those things. So these folks doing the research, they decided, okay, now let's put these folks in the scanner and let's see what this part of the brain, you know, when does it light up, okay? And another thing they found was it lights up when somebody's thirsty or when somebody's hungry, okay? So the primitive centers in the brain are saying, we need food. This part of the brain is saying, get some food, okay? Get something, get it now. So it's responsible also for telling or sort of driving you to do something that sustains life, okay? Now, as you can imagine, all of these things sort of have some, they could definitely have some relationship to addiction, I would imagine, right? Can you guys imagine that? You know, compulsively using over again, you know, driving a person to use whatever it is, you know, rating how much they like it, and then also helping them, you know, decide, if you will, I don't know if I should say decide, but helping them sort of say to themselves, I know it's really good, but I shouldn't, okay? And sure enough, they found that this dopamine chemical is also low in folks that have risk for addiction in that part of the brain. So it's low in the reward center, low in that orbital frontal cortex right above here, and the combination of the drug sort of lighting up the reward center, and then also the person being driven to use, and you have addiction. Can you imagine that? I mean, I don't know. I mean, when I think about this, it's like the deck is stacked against these folks, you know? You know, their brain lights up when they use it, and it's really, really rewarding to use it. But then you say, okay, well, yeah, but so what? That's okay. That's okay. Still, you ought to be able to, you're human, you know, you should be strong, quote unquote, and just don't use. It takes this part of the brain to do that. If it's not working, it ain't going to happen, right? Okay, so let me give you an example. This is something Nora Volkow was talking about, Dr. Volkow. And I thought this is kind of interesting. She uses addiction. To think about addiction, she says, use the analogy of thirst. Okay, you're stranded in a desert for 3 days, and you're dying of thirst, and you get rescued, and then somebody sets you down at a table and says, "Here's a glass of ice water. I don't want you to drink that water." Now, what are you guys going to do? Right? Maybe somebody that has a really overdeveloped and very good orbital frontal cortex, maybe they're able to put it off for a few minutes. But you're going to die, right? I mean, how long can you live without water? Not very long. So your body and your organism is saying, I don't care what you say, pal, I'm drinking this stuff. So you drink it, right? What's doing that? What's driving you to do that? It's the same thing that drives an alcoholic to drink another beer. It's the same thing that drives a cocaine addict to hit another, to take some more cocaine. It's the same thing, okay? So as soon as you start blaming somebody that has addiction for using again, I want you to stop and think about yourself, and I want you to stop and think, you know, when you say, geez, I shouldn't eat that other piece of chocolate, but you do anyway, or when you know, I shouldn't drink this or that, or when you eat this or that, it's the same kind of thing that's going on in the brain, okay? Has anybody, you guys thought about that kind of thing before, and correlated that stuff before? I think it's fascinating that you can see people, even if they don't have addiction, folks that have issues with eating, it's the same kind of thing, right? They get heavy set, they have trouble with obesity, and their doctor says you really got to stop this. You know, maybe they even have heart attacks. or strokes or something else related to the trouble with their weight. And sure enough, they're eating and they're eating and they're eating. And it's not easy for those folks to just flip it off and say, I'm not going to do it anymore. They're driven to eat like that, and there's some brain problem or brain issue that's causing that. This dopamine chemical too, we know that it's also involved with memory in some way. So that these folks, they'll use, and then where they're using, sort of the environment they're using in, can kind of become, there could be cues and things, okay, really powerful cues to use again. So a person that has a cocaine addiction might see powdered sugar, and man, they really there's this the pathway that says, wow, I remember that cocaine, I got to have some more of that, and they go seeking it out. So all these things kind of contribute, and it makes it obviously not very easy to give up a substance of abuse, okay? I kind of glazed over this a little bit, but you know how thirst is recurring? So like you can drink and it satisfies the thirst, but then after a while you're getting thirsty again, right? Same thing with addiction. So you can take the drug and it satisfies you for a little bit, but then after a while it's it's the same kind of thing as thirst, okay? So keep that in mind. That's kind of the craving and the drive to use again. Now, I don't want you to think that it's an absolute thing. So that the folks that have risk for addiction have all of these problems or none. It's probably a combination or a mix of this stuff, right? So some people, maybe it's the reward center that's the main issue. Some people, maybe it's this part of the brain. Maybe in some people it's both. Okay, and those are the folks that maybe unfortunately end up dying because they use until they die. They drink until they die and things like that. So it's none of these things that we talk about in here are absolutely there or absolutely not there. It's a combination. It's some kind of complicated mix of this stuff. Okay. Obviously, when we do the studies, that's kind of hard to sort out. So what you end up finding is you find the worst case scenario. So you find out what's the worst case scenario, and then you kind of have to guess or extrapolate what it might be for the folks that are somewhere in the middle that aren't necessarily that are functional. Let's say, okay, maybe because you guys know, right, with alcoholism, some folks will drink until they drink till they're dead, right? Cirrhosis of the liver, all the things that can happen, and they end up dying. Other folks, they drink for years and years and years. They're probably alcoholic, but they're functioning. They're able to go to work. They don't lose their job. They don't lose their spouse, maybe. And there's some difference there, right? There's something that drives that other person to continue till he dies. And so there's variations of all this stuff, is I guess what I want to tell you. And as you can imagine, is it likely that we're going to find one particular medicine that's going to cure this? I doubt it, okay? I mean, we talked about dopamine, that chemical, and anytime you do anything in the brain, you see dopamine's all over, right? We talked about schizophrenia and how it's affected there. Well, if you increase this dopamine chemical, you'd think that'd be easy, right? We just increase dopamine, and then that would treat all of this, right? Well, some medicines that we use for addiction help a little bit with that. Wellbutrin for quitting smoking, what's it do? It boosts dopamine, right? But number one, it does that all over the place. Okay, not just in that part of the brain, or these two parts of the brain I'm talking about, but it does it in lots of different parts of the brain. All right, so it's not so easy. And unfortunately, when you do that, sometimes you can have side effects and things that you don't necessarily want. Okay. Remember, we talked about with schizophrenia that if you gave somebody, they had too much dopamine in one part of the brain, and we said, okay, well, that's easy enough. Let's give them a medicine that blocks that. Well, then what happens, right? You get too much of that, and what happens? They get Parkinson's. They look like they have Parkinson's. Well, it's not real part, not like Michael J. Fox has, where the nerve cells die off, but you're blocking them. You're blocking the nerve cells. And that's in one other part of the brain that controls motion and movement. Okay, so as you can see, it's not so easy. And so the more complicated and the more different pathways that are involved, the harder it is to develop a medicine or a treatment for these things. And so I don't want to paint a bleak picture. I think research is constantly going on. And so if you can, let's say you could even fix like one particular issue. That might still be quite a good thing for a lot of people. Okay, I mean, we do have medicines that can help cut the craving. Let's say for some addictions. They're not perfect, and they don't lead to. It's not like you take let's use Wellbutrin in smoking for example. It's not like you guys that have tried that, and I'm sure there's a lot of you that have tried that. But as you know, it can help you cut down. It can help you quit, but it isn't